Hi all. The current TCEC season is, for me, the most exciting season I've ever witnessed. It's absolutely gripping me, especially Leela Zero, and all the tensions and drama around Leela Zero with Deus Ex controversy, etc. So this game is in round 24. Leela is playing Tucano, who's quite a dangerous bird actually, did beat Deus Ex in one of the games, I believe. So let's see this game. E4, the set position of the first four ply or half moves, is this position, and Tucano plays E takes D5. So the exchange French variation has a reputation of not many imbalances. Symmetrical pawn structure. Often the E file is used as a way of exchanging the rooks off and then agreeing a peaceful draw. Many IMs have used this, I believe, just to draw when they need. Many professional players just use the exchange French to draw when they need to secure a prize, etc. It's a good drawing system as well. If you don't want to take too much risk against the French, this is the way to go. In fact, one of the top Barnet players, John Piggott, used to play the French and said he had to give it up because people started, playing the exchange against him. He went to the Sicilian after. So will Leela be content to try and just draw this? Let's see. Knight f3 is played, bishop d6. White, though, plays quite an exciting move here, c4. So we have c6 now. An alternative here in Chess-Based Livebook is knight f6. This position where white temporarily, black temporarily gives up a pawn, is thought to be okay. Black can get that pawn back. It's thought to be okay. But here we see c6. Now, very, very unusual here. This next move, c5, it releases the tension. It's not been seen that much at all in Livebook. Knight c3 is more usual. For example, knight e7, and black has the option of giving white the isolated queen spawn here and a nice blockade square, but white has the perks as well of the e file and the e5 point. It's roughly a dynamically equal position. But this move might have some deep, dark downsides. After bishop c7, this tension release feels a little bit wrong to me, at least. Bishop d3, we see knight d7, actually. Very interesting, knight d7. Not a stereotypical move at all. You might think black might just want to get on with things, knight f6 and castle. But knight d7, after castling, guess what Leela plays here? Ingenious idea already. Creativity in the opening in the exchange French. Black to play. You might think this is really odd, but knight f8 was played. So no rush to try and castle routinely. On knight gf6, check. This position is awkward where you can't put anything in front of the king, so it doesn't make sense with knight d7 anyway. It just simply doesn't make sense. So the intention really is this knight f8 to be able to use the e6 square now. We have check. Now knight e7 actually is played here. Knight e6 immediately is also possible. This position might actually be possible, but it's not that dynamic aggressive here. The pawn structure is not very dynamic. Now the way Leela plays this, knight e7, there's an encouragement to put pressure on black with bishop g5. This is really interesting. Also, the direct knight g5 is probably worthy of mention here, because this, trying to kick the knight, it can be met by queen h5. This position is also interesting. White might actually have a small edge. If black has to play an awkward move like king d7, this is just a technical computer-generated line because it looks crazy, right? But apparently this white has a small edge anyway. So bishop g5 though was played, and Leela plays actually to unpin here f6, which you might think creates some light square weaknesses. Bishop drops back, and now king f7. Apparently on the Leela forums someone mentioned shogi players kind of castle like this manually. Botvinnik had a few games in the French defence. We had a king on f7. It is an interesting thing to do because actually this setup is still pawns potentially before pieces. Pawns before pieces as a philosophy. There's a British player that is fond of that. I can't remember the name offhand, but I'll put it in the pinned comment. And he believes, it gives maximum versatility to the pieces to keep the pieces behind the pawns. And here we do see now that potentially really aggressive pawn play. We see knight e6 here first after bishop g3, knight c3, and really aggressive pawn play is possible, which is unheard of in the French defence. Leela plays h5. So I think Leela's games qualify as the most exciting that TCEC has ever seen. It's like caveman attack, cavewoman attack Leela here, h5, from an exchange French, no less. So sometimes, maybe we shouldn't moan about the opponent seemingly giving us only the option of a draw. Leela is really playing to win this with the black pieces. Queen d2, and guess what? Cave woman is here. g5, cave woman. Rook e3, and it looks as though there's a point with these rooks doubling very naturally, but as long as the entry points are not too dangerous, this knight gets out of the way. So it's covering e6 and e8 and supports bishop f5 sometimes. The rooks do double quite naturally, but now knight e f5 hitting the rook. And the rook goes back to e2. And bishop d7. So there's no major use of the e-file in terms of entry points, which can provide lateral pressure. Nimzovich expounded that, one of the major points is lateral pressure of a file. But here it doesn't seem, without the entry points, it's not as effectual, it would seem at the moment. And meanwhile, after knight d1, Leela is pushing forward with h4. Now these pawns are very, very aggressive, and they can provoke weaknesses, which the pieces would have trouble doing. So there's a great advantage of having this kind of thing. The rook is activating with each step of the h-pawn. Well, it's almost threatening the dreaded fawn pawn, but would it just close up the position here? Does black want to actually keep things open? We see knight e3, and now rook a e8, actually. Queen c2 is played. On knight takes f5, let's have a look at this forcing sequence. Bishop takes, bishop takes. This should be an even position. But the pawns are actually quite useful here for g4 potentially to hit d4, and black should be absolutely fine. Now, Tucano didn't go in for that, so queen c2 was played, and the knight goes back. So some simplification avoided. We've still got a very, very exciting position on our hands here. It's important that bishop g6 is not allowed here, so the knight's protecting g6. g3 now. So white's taking some theoretical risks here with the light squares around the king. We see a6, queen c3, queen c8, and black is aligning to the new weaknesses behind the scenes here. So on the light squares, knight d2, bishop h3, whilst white is keen on having a queen in Siberia attacking b7 here. Typical brute force accounting style engines. b7 is the interest of white. The king is the interest of Leela here. Queen d7, we see queen c3. White is, a good word might be floundering here, it seems, without a plan. Knight e6. And now king h1 is played, knight g7. Okay, bit of repetition. Rook h6, knight b3. Bishop e6, a3. A little bit planless maybe. Knight g6. What is Leela brewing up here? Queen b4. White is again interested now in b7 with the with knight a5 to follow here. It looks as though b7 is white's concern, or interest rather. Rook b8, which seemingly, if you thought this was like an old version of Leela, this would be like a tactical blunder, because doesn't this just blunder a pawn for absolutely nothing? this move, rook b8. An alternative here, say rook e7. There is a strong move in this position in the form of knight g4, because the two rooks are not just pretty, but they're functional here. If bishop takes, white has bishop takes g6 check, and then rook takes e7 with a big advantage. So rook e7 after knight g4 is not very palatable. On rook h8, then knight a5, white's getting a small edge. So here, anyway, this move just seems to lose a pawn to bishop takes a6. Has Leela just tactically blundered here? What's the idea? Well, there's no bishop takes g6 here, so it's like momentarily giving black a free hand, momentarily. So bishop g4 is played, hitting the rook. Now, taking here is really not the idea at all, but and mostly pointless. For example, here, queen d6, white has a big advantage. So bishop g4, and we see the rook moving, actually. So why did the rook move? Well, let's have a look. Knight takes g4, queen takes. This position with knight f4 is interesting. For example, here, this is getting very dangerous for white's king, as you might expect. Hg, there's no Hg because of rook h1 checkmate. And on fg here, it seems knight f5, for example, with the idea of knight takes g3 is actually very strong. So say g takes, this position is good for black. And say the rook moved back to there, then just taking there, and then queen g4, black has a big advantage. And say rook c7 instead, then knight takes g3 is slaughtering the white king here. For example, here there's rook h1, queen f2, there's queen h1, checkmate. It's pretty much slaughter time after knight takes g3. So there's some very interesting variations if instead, knight takes g4 rather than the game continuation of just moving the rook rather meekly to c2. So the rook is just moved here. Now, we see another fascinating move in the extreme. Bishop h5. It looks a little bit awkward to do this, and why would Leela be interested in doing this at all? My theory is knight f4 to h3 is the idea. h3 is needed, so it can't be used by a bishop. It's better with a knight. I believe this is the major idea. If we look at this position, if knight f4 here, for example, bishop h5 can still be played here with the knight h3 idea as an example. Here, hg, there's very fun variations of bishop f3 check showing the dangers. Knight g1, this is crazy, stopping king e2. Queen h3 just mating is a very, very amusing variation. So this is why this knight h3 seems to spring up as a key idea of bishop h5. On king h1 here, then there's knight takes f2, hg, and this is devastating. After bishop f3, there's a devastating attacking potential in black's position, which is unheard of usually in the exchange French to have these exciting possibilities. This kind of crushing attack becomes possible. So very, very interesting stuff. So yeah, knight f4 would seem to be the idea, another idea of danger with bishop h5. So anyway, bishop h5 is the move order chosen by Leela. And now knight f4 here is played. So it's still some of the dangers that we've seen before. Bishop f1 is played. To take b7 does seem absolutely crazy to go into a self-pin. Let's just have a quick look. Bishop f3, for example, queen h3. And here queen takes h2 becomes possible. After hg, this is mating white. King here, there's rook h1, checkmate. And king takes, there's rook h3, checkmate, saying the dangers that the black pieces are not just pretty, that they're actually pretty lethal. Another possibility here to have a look, instead of taking is g takes f4. Here, g takes this position. There's rook g6. Yes, with h3, form pawn, rook takes. And this position, it seems to be very crumbly for white. f3 in particular looks weak. Now there's knight g5 on the cards, as well as knight takes d4. So this position would just be, black has a big advantage. So very, very exciting stuff behind the scenes. So bishop f1. Now we have bishop f3. Queen b6. The queen is volunteering to go to Siberia on holiday here. So knight f e6. One of my big concerns about the Leela test ID 10161 when it was used in this tournament was would Leela have the same iconic style? She has demonstrated, actually. Yeah, she does in many, many games. So that's really cool. Now here, after queen b6, if we have a look, why the retreat? Why not here? Let's have a look. The thing is, taking and check is useful for white for taking the rook, because hg, there's fg, and the rook defends laterally, and the knight's defending g2. There's no attack. White has a big advantage there. So black does have to be careful here. Knight f goes back for a moment. Knight f e6. Queen b4. And now g4, which gives a new opportunity altogether. Knight g5 to h3 stuff going on. The queen goes to b6. It seems Tucano is fluttering around aimlessly, like a bird, aimlessly around the room. Okay, so we have rook h8, rook h8, rook h to h8. Okay, if knight takes d4, rook d2, this position is also quite nice for black, actually. It's a strong position, but in fact this was chosen. Bishop d3, now knight g5. We have now knight b3, and now rook comes to the centre file, believe it or not. Rook e6. Black is also conducting the attack with a view of the centre file, which we've seen in some other games. It's not just a kind of really one-dimensional attack. There's a respect in Leela games of the centre whilst conducting attacks, a real respect for the value of the centre as well. So here, by the way, this is also a very dangerous move already. Rook takes e3, showing the strength of black's position. For example, here is really dangerous for white. So this is actually a really strong position right here and now, where rook takes e3. So rook, pardon me. So rook here was played, rook e6 instead, building up, doubling. And now queen d2 was played. White has to be very careful here. On knight d1, you'd think the queen is holding e1, but this is not possible because of this background tactic, bishop g2 check, luring the king away from the queen. So it's not possible to do certain things for white. So queen d2, and now f5. And, it's based on this bishop g2 that this is immune, this pawn. Just to show that again, white played a4. If knight takes, then again we see this mechanism of bishop g2 winning the queen. Or bishop takes, same thing. Just to put it on the board. Just to familiarise with that pattern. There's no big difference in position. This is still working here. So a4 is played. And now we have queen f6. And this actually prepares now, as well as protecting the pawn officially, prepares f4. So it's like Tucano has lost control of the pawn breaks available to black. The pieces are behind the pawns here. That is a big principle, which many attacking players use. Pieces, largely behind the pawns, and the breaks are all fully supported. And white is just spectating it. Out of desperation, plays knight c4 here, it seems. If white carries on rather meekly with this, which is rather pointless and slow, then there's f4, just ripping white's king safety to shreds. For example, this line is checkmate. So, yeah, if instead after f4, knight f5, then say takes on g3, and this position is just absolute murder. Check, check, mate. Yes, it's just so crushing. Everything's just so crushing here. On king f2, then there's check and queening. It's absolutely crushing stuff. So there's this desperate looking knight c4. Leela just takes that and now just carries on opening up things, hg. And then we have bishop e4, rook c3, bishop d5. So yeah, black's fully in control here. Look at black's pieces. Bishop takes, c takes, a5, and now knight e4. Absolutely gigantic position. It seems white has been completely crushed, and gives up this exchange, which gives white, basically, white is a rook down, gives black the extra rook, basically. After king g1, the game ended here. Plus 6.5 for both engines over 8 half moves, or 4 full moves, and the game gets terminated. In black's favour here, a possible game continuation. Let's see, knight f5, for example, puts pressure on d4 and supports e3. So say e3, knight takes d4, black's just a rook up, basically. Thanks very much, and 2 connected pass pawns in the centre are about to crash through. That's pretty convincing enough, I believe. So I think this is one of the most exciting exchange Frenches that TCEC has ever seen. I doubt there's been a more exciting one. Leela went basically all out despite the exchange French. And maybe there's a moral lesson here that we can sometimes change course or change a philosophy put upon us. We can do radical stuff and make things exciting. So like Leela stirred up a lot of trouble on the king side with the aggressive pawns. So sometimes it's not just what the opening sets out, and maybe this kind of game example is important for French defence players desperately needing to win sometimes with the black pieces and worried about their opponents playing exchange French. Well, have a look at this game. You can change the course of things. You can spice things up. An instructive game, I believe. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.